Why is Bigfoot restricted from coming in contact with us, sitting down at a campfire, and mind speaking with all of us?
What if the real mystery isn't whether Bigfoot exists, but why it doesn't interact with us the way every other large animal does? That question sits at the center of everything David Paulides uncovered. For decades, the conversation has been stuck on blurry footage and campfire stories.
One side believes it's an ape, gorilla, predominantly Gigantopithecus or Paranthropus.
But when you step back and look at the pattern, something doesn't line up. A creature this large, this widespread, should be impossible to miss. And yet, direct encounters are rare, controlled, and often end abruptly, as if something is deliberately limiting contact. That alone suggests intent, not instinct, not random movement. Intent. And once you start looking at it that way, the entire subject shifts. This is no longer about discovering an undiscovered animal. It becomes a question of behavior, awareness, and ultimately, what kind of being would choose to stay hidden in plain sight. A detective approaches the impossible. David Paulides didn't come into this as a believer. He came in as a detective. After a career in law enforcement, SWAT operations, homicide investigations, he applied the same mindset to Bigfoot. No assumptions, no chasing myths, just patterns, evidence, and consistency across independent sources. Instead of cameras and speculation, he relied on interviews, cross-referencing accounts the way he would question witnesses in a criminal case. He spent time in places like the Hoopa Valley in Northern California, where sightings weren't treated as mysteries at all. To the people living there, these encounters were part of reality. What stood out wasn't just the frequency of sightings, it was the consistency. People who had never met described the same features, the same behavior, the same presence. That kind of alignment doesn't happen easily, especially across generations. So Paulides leaned further in. He brought in professionals. He documented everything. And slowly, a clearer picture began to form. The face that shouldn't exist. One of the most unsettling pieces of evidence came from eyewitness sketches. Paulides worked with a forensic sketch artist, the same process used to identify criminals. Witness after witness sat down, described what they saw, and never saw each other's sessions. The result was the same every time. The sketches didn't resemble an ape. The structure was too balanced. The proportions too human. The brow was heavy, but the eyes carried something familiar, something expressive. Animals don't get described this way. Witnesses don't talk about facial presence when recalling wildlife encounters. But here, they did. Repeatedly. Footprints that defy fabrication. Footprints collected across decades and across states showed the same features, not just size, but detail. Dermal ridges, pressure patterns matching natural walking, a mid-foot flexibility known as a mid-tarsal break that humans don't have. Forensic specialists couldn't dismiss them. The anatomical precision was too high, too consistent, too complex to fake. The locations made it stranger still, remote areas where no one would go just to plant evidence. No payoff, no audience. If these prints aren't hoaxes, then something is leaving them. Something with weight, structure, and movement, consistent with a real physical body. The sounds that changed everything. Audio evidence pushed things further. Recordings from the Sierra Nevada mountains, known as the Sierra Sounds, were analyzed by a professional trained in language detection. What he found wasn't random noise. The recordings showed structure, repetition, patterns resembling syntax, multiple voices interacting and responding in ways that suggested coordination. The vocal range alone exceeded human capability, spanning deep frequencies to high-pitched tones in the same sequence. But the critical detail wasn't the sound, it was the organization within it. Language isn't just about noise. It's about structure. And if something demonstrates structure, it demonstrates cognition. That changes the category entirely. The DNA that broke the model. Then came the most controversial piece of evidence: DNA analysis. Biological samples were collected and sent to labs using proper protocols, following the same standards used in criminal investigations. The results were not what anyone expected. Mitochondrial DNA, passed from the mother, came back fully human. Not similar, not close, fully human. But the nuclear DNA, inherited from both parents, matched nothing in any known database. Every organism on Earth has genetic relatives, something it connects to. But this didn't. If one side is human and the other matches nothing science recognizes, then we're not looking at an undiscovered animal. We're looking at something that doesn't fit current evolutionary models at all. Tracks that end without explanation. Even when tracked in real time, these encounters don't behave normally. Footprints have been documented crossing open terrain, only to stop abruptly. No change in direction, no signs of jumping or climbing, just gone. In one instance, a tracker followed prints across snow, calculating weight based on depth and stride. Everything pointed to a massive physical being. And then mid-step, the trail ended. No disturbance around it, no logical explanation. These cases aren't isolated. Similar reports exist across multiple regions, involving trained observers who know how to read terrain, presence, movement, disappearance. As if the rules change midway through the interaction. What indigenous knowledge already knew? Long before any investigation, indigenous communities had already defined what these beings were. They didn't call them animals. They called them people. Different tribes, different regions, but the descriptions align. The forest people, the tall ones, beings that live alongside humans, but operate differently. Intelligent, aware, capable of communication, and governed by their own structures. What stands out isn't fear, it's familiarity. These weren't stories of monsters. They were descriptions of neighbors. While modern science debates existence, these communities moved past that question generations ago. The focus was never, are they real? But how do we live alongside them without disrupting something we don't fully understand? Encounters that go beyond sight. Some of the most difficult reports to process aren't visual at all. Witnesses describe feeling a presence before seeing anything. Not fear, in the usual sense, something more directed. An attention that feels intentional, almost measured. In some cases, people report receiving thoughts that don't feel like their own. Clear impressions telling them to leave an area. Not vague intuition, something precise enough to change behavior immediately. One hiker described exactly that, a sudden, overwhelming command to leave. No sound, no visible source, just certainty. He packed up and walked out. The next day, A rock slide buried the exact spot where he had been sitting. These experiences appear consistently enough across different locations and timelines to raise a question. What if interaction isn't limited to what we can see? The silence around it. Then there's the part no one talks about openly. Reports from government personnel, park rangers, and military staff describe encounters that were documented internally, but never acknowledged publicly. Written reports, filed observations, sometimes backed by multiple witnesses. Standard protocol appears consistent. Observe, document, deny. Footage gets classified. Reports get archived. Witnesses are told not to discuss what they saw. If this were simply an undiscovered species, that response wouldn't make sense. Discovery would be celebrated. It would be studied, announced, one of the biggest scientific findings of the century. So the silence itself becomes part of the evidence. When information is consistently contained, rather than explored, it raises a different question. Not just what is being seen, but why the reaction follows the same pattern every time. The question that changes everything. After decades of investigation, the conclusion isn't simple. The evidence doesn't point to an ape. It doesn't fit known biology. It doesn't behave like wildlife. If these beings share human DNA, if they demonstrate intelligence, structure, and awareness, if entire cultures have recognized them as people for generations, then what exactly are they? And more importantly, why have we spent so long refusing to consider that question seriously? Because once you do, the mystery isn't Bigfoot anymore. It's us. How we define what counts as human, what we choose to accept as real, and how quickly we dismiss anything that doesn't fit the model we've built. David Paulides didn't set out to prove a legend. He followed the evidence, and the evidence didn't lead to an animal. It led somewhere far more uncomfortable.